Our next speaker, Urban Susnik, started his career in academia as a lecturer and researcher, but then transitioned to banking, developing models for different types of risks, credit risk, market risk, operational risk, etc. He's currently head of the model validation department in NLB Group. He loves developing whole products, not just their parts. And he's also an analytically minded macroeconomist whose interests lie mainly in data science, advancements in the field of machine learning, and app development. And he'll talk about model validation genesis.
We on? Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Oops, Daisy, that went too fast. Okay, well, that was a nice introduction. So yeah, model validation, not exactly one of the more interesting topics, I would suppose, considering that I just attended a lecture where I saw a small movie made in an Unreal Engine using essentially data from a Serbian actor and manipulating it to create a very wonderful piece of art and technology. But that's also one of the issues. So when you're head of the validation unit in a group such as NLB, which is a legacy institution, we have at any moment in time a couple of hundred models that are running live. You get, I mean, on the one hand, you're not very popular amongst your colleagues because you're the one that essentially gets to say whether a model can go into production or not. So unless you're a power-hungry sadist, it isn't really, you know, it probably isn't the most interesting field of work in data science. That being said, another perk of the job is that you get to have a very good overview of all of the data science projects in the bank, or actually the whole banking group, and you get to see the challenges and issues of those projects. And very often, or almost always, you see that the issue is not with the data science teams themselves, but that the issue is how their products are being used or misused or not used, and how an organization that primarily wasn't built to handle machine learning, AI, whichever buzzword you want to fill in, which wasn't primarily a technology company but is making a transition, how it handles this is that essentially that the problems which are either managerial or organizational, this would be probably my main point. If you remember the keynote address was from Cassie, was basically where she has a very nice definition of how machines learn. Essentially, you throw in some data, you throw in some examples, and you make extrapolations, you make inferences, right? And the inferences that we've made by looking at our projects is that it's usually not the technology which is problematic, but everything else around it. So how do you implement it? And from the standpoint of the upper management, what do they believe that they can achieve with it? And the problem with technology is, like I said, just in the lecture room on the other side of the hall, you see wondrous pieces of arts being created with these new technologies. This not so wondrous piece of art was made by myself with the help of OpenAI's DALL-E. It's called Machine Gods in the Sky. So you essentially give this model 5 words and it creates something somewhat of an approximation of some sort of modern art, right? We were exposed this year to generative AI and to the wonders of ChatGPT, which again, you can see that the higher-ups in many corporations are going to see this as, okay, can we replace some workers with chatbots? Can we be more productive? How can we lever this and be more efficient and get more P&L and all of the good stuff, right? Now, the problem with every new technology is, why are you actually using it, right? Steve Jobs had, a nice, I'm probably going to butcher the quote, but he said basically you should always focus on the end product, and you shouldn't be blinded by, engineers, because they love technology, they are often blinded by it. And then the issue with technology is that we usually don't understand it, right? Another speaker made the point that 20 years ago, simple chess programs, which are just if-else statements, were considered AI. Now that's not considered AI. Now that's considered a completely deterministic set of rules. Nobody's impressed by this. A whole lot of work went into something that could now be, bested in minutes. But that's an issue with technology in general, right? And the issue here is that if you don't understand something, it is almost as if it were magic, right? It is almost as, it gets religious undertones. I mean, I'm here on the Cryptica stage, and God knows that, the crypto field has its, its horde of believers, hodlers. But AI, is just another buzzword that has a lot of believers as well, right? And as with any religion, there's not just the believers, there's not just the idealists, but there's also people who are going to make a quick buck from this. There's also people, there's vultures who are going to be coming to institutions such as ours, to legacy institutions, and they will be selling to the upper management quick solutions, technological solutions for what are essentially managerial issues and legacy issues, usually to do with data and processes and what do you actually want to achieve, right? So how do you limit the power of religion, the power of belief? Well, I would argue you have to be an atheist. You have to forget that your solution to issues which are essentially, if I go back to the keynote address, for example, the keynote address was all about data. But what is data? Data is essentially, it is the legacy of the firm, it is the legacy of any organization, and how you organize data, or how you maybe didn't organize data in the past, is going to bite you in the ass when you want to leverage that data to make predictions about the future, or about your clients, or using these methods which are essentially based off of data, right? And if you don't have that thing covered, if you don't have the organizational part covered, which most legacy organizations don't have this covered good enough, then all of these buzzwords, AI, machine learning, any new technology is not going to save those issues. It's not going to solve your problems. It will, however, and especially now that annual reports are being read through by scraping them and throwing them into models that look for keywords, it might look good on your annual reports, right? Which is obviously something which are quick solutions that organizations are doing and wasting their developers' time by essentially creating products that are useless, right? So stuff like this can happen, and our role, the model validation role, the wider role that we have, not just whether or not we say that something can go or can't go into production, is to sort of limit the waste when it comes to such projects as well. Because we have an official mandate. I was told, I successfully never read through those documents, but I was told that there are documents that say that it is good practice that we should exist in banking as a separate unit to make sure that we manage model risk. Because essentially, by the way, how data science sort of crept into banking was through risk departments. For example, one of the more basic vanilla models that are used in banking, for those of you that aren't in banking, is probability of default models, right? So you want to be able to rate your clients according to, you want to have a probability of whether or not they're going to be running late with their loan repayments, right? But by doing so, you've exposed yourself to a novel type of risk. You've, hopefully, if you have good models, made your credit risk smaller, but you've exposed yourself to this new risk of using a tool that you previously didn't use, which is model risk. And officially, that's all that our mandate is, right? We are here to manage model risk, and we come up with documents that people should ideally follow. We come up with standards for different types of models, and then we enforce those standards. And because we like app development, we try to sort of come up with the technological part of the solutions as well, so not just writing Word documents, but doing the whole shebang, doing the essentially when we change our internal regulation, we change the applications with it, right? That being said, reality isn't as simple as that, right? In reality, organizations which aren't primarily financial, which aren't primarily IT institutions, right? They will be doing mistakes, and there's nothing wrong with that. The problem is that we often don't admit that we make mistakes, right? So some of the issues that I think most banks in the region are facing is, the very simple stuff. How to be fast with model deployment. And if you're not fast with model deployment, how are you going to be fast with redeployment once you see that, the model starts to taper off, once you see that the performance starts falling? Then again, if we go back to the keynote address, well, the reality of organizations that have existed for a long time is that, well, you're going to have a lot of data that isn't structured exactly the way you might want to for the problems you want to solve, right? So the data janitor analogy was very apt, and I couldn't agree more with the fact that we would need them, right? Then there's also the issue of outside vendors. This is something that really grinds my gears, right? Because outside vendors, this is part of the ideology/religion I'm talking about, right? The fact that, you have headlines like this, AI-powered computational finance, no such thing exists. This is pure BS. You need to solve the foundational issues, which mainly have to do with cleaning up your data and having manageable pipelines and solving all of that before you start thinking about AI-powered anything. Or this year it's AI-powered, next year it's going to be some other technology. Buzzwords are not going to change your organization. PowerPoint presentations are not going to change your organization. So we went for a wider mandate in as much as we, sometimes you have in large organizations more freedom than people realize, right? It's just whether or not you are assertive or not, right? Because we give recommendations that the ECB, that the regulators see. So to some degree, people have to adapt to our recommendations. So then it really depends on what our vision is for the organization, and we're a very small team, but we can leverage that power to a larger degree than people probably thought, because otherwise I probably wouldn't have gotten this job. But you have to be honest about yourself. What is feasible change, right? I like to call our job sort of a revolution by decree, an institutional revolution within the organization. But when you start revolutions, the danger is that you're going to be disappointed. Your eyes are too big, your expectations are too big. So you have to balance legacy with vision, and you have to be honest about where you stand, right? I've seen documents in the bank which were essentially copy-pasting Google's vision for machine learning ops. Makes no sense. If we can't even do some of the basic stuff as fast as we like, then why go to the next buzzword when you haven't even, handled your first one? you have to be realistic about where you are. And it's not that you are, it's not like, by the way, it's not like that things aren't changing all the time. It's not like we're not adapting as fast as possible, but there are definitely parts where it can't just be the data science teams that sort of move everything forward. And you have to be honest that that's where you actually are. And if not, you're not going to be honest. By the way, the easy route would be, because potentially all of our output could just be Word documents with standards, with policies and all that. And it's very easy to be optimistic when it comes to documents and presentations. It's very easy to say, well, that's our vision in the next 5 years. But and then when the vision inevitably never happens, you say it's somebody else's fault. But, that wasn't what we wanted to get across when we were crafting new versions of essentially what are the standards that we want to enforce across the group. An interesting, bear with me, this transition is pretty hard. I hope I make the segue. Back in the 17th century, René Descartes envisioned or said that God was a watchmaker. Now, my hypothesis is that he said this because watches were acts of technological wonder at the time. And, it made sense that since the universe makes sense and runs like a well-oiled mechanism, then why wouldn't God be a watchmaker? So think about what are the qualities of models, right? I mean, technology is often, in a sort of way, it inspires us, machine learning to some degree, right? If you think about machine learning and how you learn, I mean, to me it was inspirational in the sense of, but it is sort of, you need a reinforcement mechanism, right? You need a cost function. And organizations need the same thing. So if we are a model, what are our characteristics? Yeah? What is our activation function? What triggers us, right? So we are, at the same time, a discriminative AI model, because we say whether, this model is good, this model is bad. We're also a generative AI model, because we write documents describing at length whether something is good or bad. Or maybe we're, probably some people would say that we're not discriminative AI or even discriminative I, but maybe just discriminative. Okay, I'll let others decide. But okay, what are our triggers? And here we come to essentially, and again, here you see that you might have more freedom within a large organization than you maybe imagined. But essentially it comes down to your philosophy and your vision. Because let's be honest, and this was another nice thing about the keynote address, this thing is much more subjective than people say, right? We say we're data-driven, fine. We're data-driven as long as we like the data and as long as we like the outputs. The moment those two things aren't true, we become a bit less data-driven. And that's true for all of us. But essentially, if we view our work as essentially an organizational model, what makes us tick? Well, because, by the way, all of these things, right? Now, this isn't philosophy, vision, and all of that. You could view this as just different weights and biases in our decision-making process, right? But our vision, what we want to impose, isn't the sadistic, power-hungry vision that I talked about at the beginning. We don't like to just say no, because that's not the point. The revolution by decree that we're trying to achieve, the increasing level of quality of our models and of the data science projects and how they're used in the bank, are essentially, and this is my personal vision of working with these teams, of seeing how much they adapt to new technologies, how if you hire good people and you let them do their job, they're going to do a good job, so just let them do their job, right? We want to empower these teams. Because again, at least for legacy institutions, I would say that the problems that you hit as an institution are usually not situated in these teams. These teams are willing to learn, these teams are willing to work overtime, and these teams are grinding and improving themselves. Sure, we give them a kick and a nudge occasionally, and mainly we're not happy with their documentation, right? Usually, if the people are competent, if it's not a coding error, it's usually just, write the documentation better, right? That's usually our recommendation, because usually they get it right. Now, whether or not we can leverage this as an organization is a wholly different matter. And one of the things that we changed as fast as we could with the new model governance is that we've empowered these data science units to be able to stop stupid projects at the very beginning, so that if the upper management has an idea that they want to implement and the teams know that it's not feasible, they get a veto, right? So we're not just, if we go back to the model analogy, right? We're not a simple constant model that just likes to say no. This would be, by the way, very easy, and this would make you popular with the internal audit team, right? Or external audit, the regulators. And you would always be on the safe side, because even if you said yes to some degree, you'd say, well, but see, I told you about those issues, right? And you would be hiding behind saying no all the time. But you're also not in the appeasement business, right? Because if you're always saying yes, well then, apart from the fact that you're going to allow bad models to go into production, you're not going to be raising the bar with each iteration. By the way, I think that another key problem with data science projects and how they're implemented, and the promise of AI, machine learning, or modeling in general is, yes, the expectations are often too high, but also what I've seen is that we have these megalomaniacal projects that last for a couple of years, and they don't deliver fast enough, right? And then what happens in the end is people try to sort of say like, well, we didn't fail, we achieved something, right? Whereas if you have deliverables on a short time scale, you're going to be learning, because how does learning actually happen, right? By iterating and by making mistakes. So you should be making mistakes as fast as possible and as many as possible. Whereas, if you have a grand Soviet Union-like 5-year plan of, and there's a new data warehouse, and there's new MLOps, and there's and there's the Google plan. You're not Google. You're a bank. Be a bank. Fix this problem, fix the next problem. Go with the minimal standards in the short time, and have a vision for the longer time periods. So we're all about making mistakes, right? And we're all about the teams who make models being allowed to make mistakes. Because if mistakes are done, again, butchering Steve Jobs, that means somebody's doing something. That means and if somebody's doing something, we're learning. And that's definitely the main takeaway of what in the sense of, if you want to get closer to this thing, make mistakes. And models, again, if going back to the analogy that I didn't really sell all that well, of viewing our own actions as being an organizational model, right? Yeah, models learn by making mistakes and they get punished for them, right? And in a sense, we're the cost function for the model development teams, right? So we're the ones who sort of punish them and give them negative utility so that they hopefully get better. Again, that doesn't really make cooperation always easy, but and yeah, accumulating scar tissue as an organization, that's not just talking as a head of the model validation unit, but just in general, right? As a banking group with, like I said, a couple of hundred models live at any given point in time, that's definitely something we have to go through. And kudos to the management boards for realizing that, okay, fine, maybe they can't code their own models, but they realize that this is something that is worth investing in. The downside, the problem is, like I said, the hype surrounding all of this, so AI-powered computational something, yeah, you are going to get people who are going to try and ponder and sell you ideas that don't really make sense, and they oversell it. And I was told, I didn't attend this speech, but I was told that another lecturer mentioned that when trying to implement AI into your organization, this is one of the key things that organizations often fail, right? Somebody oversells something and then promises results in the next 4 months, and voila. People get inevitably disappointed, and these projects lose their backing in the longer run. That's not something that I think anybody should wish for. But anyway, the scar tissue, right? Maybe attention is all you need, right? Because it gives you all of that philosophy. It gives you the feedback effect, right, guys? You do become a transformer model, right? in a way. You do sort of become, you start thinking of yourself, oh, look at me, I'm Optimus Prime right here, right? Anyway, no, but essentially because we need to adapt as well, right? Because the mistakes that we make, we give recommendations that potentially can't be closed, right? Because, yeah, because we were just looking at the model and we weren't looking at the process, right? So that's on us. I mean, strictly speaking, the good part is it's not on us, it's on the data science teams, but you know what I'm saying, right? So the good part is the cost function doesn't exist for us as often as it does for them. But what our vision was, sort of what the mandate that we sort of took upon ourselves because nobody stopped us, was that we want to incentivize constant improvement and change. And this is something that we saw that the teams were doing by themselves anyway, right? But the bosses aren't always happy with improvement and change because, you know, sometimes stability is easier to accept. So that's a mindset that we had to change and combat as well. And here we try to actually help the data science teams because, you know, some people, one gets the feeling that there are people who would prefer that models would give a constant output because, you know, we have a model, but it's always within a very acceptable range and bounded. No, we sort of try to actually cover their methodological advances, right? If they make sense, right? If they don't. But like I said, looking at most of the projects, the methodology was not the issue. It was everything else. The projects themselves were not the issue, but how you... That's why when I was introduced that I like whole products, right? Because the key thing, I think, for organizations is to think how you're going to put these models into your processes, right? Are you going to have the same underwriting process when you have a model? Or are you going to be maybe making some cost-saving adjustments by believing your model, actually, and maybe saying, well, let's see if we still need the underwriters. As, you know, as shitty as that sounds, but it's a dog-eat-dog world out there. Well, there's also the fun part of the job, the sadistic part, gatekeeping against buzzwords, and you know, we sort of view ourselves as NLB Group's Night Watch, and I'm the Jon Snow who knows nothing, but is nevertheless happy telling everybody how they should do their job and implement change to you know, digitize ourselves and automate ourselves and all of that. Yeah, and this would, with this failed joke, I end my talk. So yeah.
Maybe one question. We have time for one question, if anyone wants to ask. If not, thank you.